There's a question that almost everyone carries in silence. Why do I keep getting hurt? Why is it that no matter how careful I am, no matter how much I learn from the past, the same kind of wound finds me again? Different faces, different cities, different jobs, but the same pattern. It almost feels as if pain is searching for you, like a shadow that knows your scent. Carl Jung believed that this isn't random, that the pain you meet on the outside is not just misfortune or bad luck. It's a reflection of something deeper, something already alive inside you. And until you face it, until you know its shape, life has a way of making you confront it again and again. Think of someone who grows up with a cold, distant parent. They promise themselves, "I'll never end up with someone like that." And yet, years later, they find themselves drawn to partners who are emotionally unavailable, partners who leave them feeling invisible. Or consider the employee who always feels undervalued. They change companies, switch careers, reinvent their resume. But no matter where they go, sooner or later, they feel the same sting: ignored, overlooked, cut out of the recognition they crave. From the outside, it looks like coincidence, but Jung would call it something else, a psychological necessity, an inner structure replaying itself in the outer world. That's why you keep getting hurt, not because the world is cruel at random, but because your unconscious keeps staging the same play with different actors. Jung called this confrontation with the unconscious the most important work a person can do. Because if you don't do it, you remain at the mercy of what you don't understand. And the things you refuse to understand about yourself come back in the form of fate. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung wrote, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Let's pause there. Think about how that applies to your life. When you say, "Why do I always meet people who betray me?" Or, "Why does every workplace feel toxic?" Or, "Why do I always get overlooked?" That is your unconscious speaking through repetition. That is your wound choosing for you, even when you think you are choosing freely. And it's terrifying to realize, because it means the source of pain isn't simply out there. It's also in here. Now, Jung's life itself was proof of this process. He didn't just study it from a safe academic distance. He lived through it. After his break with Freud, he fell into what he later called his confrontation with the unconscious. He experienced visions, voices, and an inner flood of images so intense that he feared he might lose his mind. But instead of running from it, he did something radical. He wrote it down. He painted it. He gave form to the chaos. That became the Red Book, a record of how pain, confusion, and inner conflict could become material for growth instead of a prison. And this is the hard truth Jung discovered. The very places where you keep getting hurt are the doorways to transformation. But only if you stop pretending that the problem is always out there. Think of projection. Jung explained that the unconscious often throws parts of ourselves that we don't want to see onto other people. Weakness you deny in yourself shows up in the colleague you can't stand. Aggression you repress looks obvious in your partner. And the betrayal you can't forgive in yourself becomes visible in the friend who let you down. And here's the dangerous part. Because you don't realize it's a projection, you keep fighting them, blaming them, cutting them out, while the part in you that needs healing remains untouched. That's why the wound repeats. Because the psyche insists on bringing you face to face with the parts of yourself you'd rather deny. This is why Jung emphasized the shadow. The shadow is not just the dark side, it's everything about yourself you've disowned. And when you refuse to own it, life has a way of delivering it back to you through others. That betrayal that broke you, that rejection that gutted you, that humiliation you can't forget. Jung would say, those are encounters with your shadow. They show you what is unresolved in yourself, but here's the catch. Most people don't see it this way. They say, no, it was that person. It was that situation. It was that boss, that partner, that friend. And maybe that's partly true. But if you stop there, you miss the deeper point. The world is a mirror. The hurt outside is reflecting the hurt inside. And until you break that mirror open, you will keep standing in front of the same reflection, with new frames, new colors, new faces, but the same image staring back at you. So let me ask you something. What is the wound that keeps repeating in your life? Think about it honestly. Is it rejection, abandonment, being underestimated, being betrayed? If you trace back through your relationships, your career, your friendships, you'll likely see a pattern. And that pattern is not just about them. It's about you. Not in the sense of blame, not in the sense of guilt, but in the sense of responsibility. Because until you take responsibility for your inner world, you remain chained to the cycle. You remain available for hurt over and over again. Jung's answer wasn't avoidance. It wasn't building thicker armor or cutting people out forever. It was individuation. The process of becoming whole by facing what you've denied and integrating it into consciousness. In other words, the only way to stop being hurt in the same way is to face the part of you that attracts that hurt, that unconsciously expects it, that secretly confirms it. Think of the person who always ends up with controlling partners. If they never confront the part of themselves that feels safer being controlled than being free, they will meet that same controlling partner again, just in a different body. Think of the worker who always feels overlooked. If they never face the part of themselves that is terrified of stepping fully into the light, they will meet the same rejection, no matter where they go. Life is ruthless in this way. It doesn't let you bypass your own unconscious, and that is why you keep getting hurt. Now let's go deeper into Jung's thought. He said that when we ignore the inner conflict, the psyche compensates by forcing it into the outer world. That's why you feel drawn to the very situations that wound you. It's not masochism. It's your psyche demanding that you face what you've avoided. But here's the tragic part. Most people don't realize this. So instead of learning from the repetition, they just get more bitter, more defensive, more armored. They build higher walls, and those walls become prisons. They never let anyone close enough to hurt them, but they also never let anyone close enough to love them. And so they remain stuck, protected from pain, but also cut off from life. Jung would say that is not healing. That is stagnation. The real healing begins when you stop asking, "Why do they keep hurting me?" and start asking, "What part of me keeps choosing this wound?" That's not an easy question. It requires brutal honesty. Because sometimes the answer is, I keep betraying myself. I keep silencing my own needs. I keep giving away power I don't have to give. I keep choosing comfort over growth. And when you see that, you realize why the world keeps hurting you. It's because you keep leaving the door open. Not consciously, not deliberately, but through the patterns you never confronted. So let's make this practical. The first step is recognition. Notice the recurring theme of your hurts. Name it. Don't brush it off as coincidence. Write it down. The second step is reflection. Ask yourself, what part of me might be unconsciously confirming this? What belief, what fear, what hidden expectation makes this wound feel inevitable? The third step is integration. That means acknowledging the shadow, bringing the hidden part into consciousness. For example, if you always feel rejected, maybe you need to face the part of you that rejects yourself first. If you always feel controlled, maybe you need to face the part of you that secretly fears freedom. And the final step is responsibility. Taking ownership of your inner world instead of blaming the outer world. This doesn't mean excusing toxic people. It doesn't mean saying, "It's all my fault." It means refusing to give your unconscious the power to script your fate. Jung's entire philosophy of individuation rests on this. The unconscious is not your enemy. It is your unfinished business. And if you ignore it, life will keep bringing it to your doorstep. So the question is not, how do I avoid being hurt? The question is, how do I use the hurt to see myself more clearly? Because the moment you see clearly, the pattern loses its power. The wound is no longer just a wound. It becomes a teacher. And that is when the cycle begins to break. This is just the beginning. We've set the stage for understanding why hurt repeats, why the unconscious mirrors itself through others, and why the shadow refuses to be ignored. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into how these patterns play out in everyday life, the traps people fall into when trying to escape, and the practical ways Jung believed you can begin to free yourself from the cycle of repetition. Because the truth is, hurt will find you until you learn to face what is inside you. We ended with a difficult truth. That hurt keeps repeating until you face what is hidden inside you. But knowing this is only the beginning. Because once you realize the pattern, you step into dangerous territory. The mind will try every trick to avoid responsibility. It will invent illusions, false exits, ways of convincing you that the problem is solved when, in reality, nothing has changed. And this is where most people remain trapped. So let's talk about these traps. Let's talk about the illusions that promise freedom but actually reinforce the cycle. Maybe you've said to yourself, if I just change jobs, I'll be free of this toxic pattern. Or, if I meet the right partner, all the pain will finally make sense. Or even, if I prove myself with enough achievements, no one will ever be able to hurt me again. Each of these beliefs feels logical. They even feel empowering. But Jung would say that's the shadow whispering in disguise. Because all of these solutions are external. They promise change without inner transformation. Think of the person who leaves one relationship only to find themselves in the same relationship with someone new. They think, this time it's different. But the same arguments reappear, the same frustrations, the same wounds, different body, same story. That's because they never face the part of themselves that attracts or tolerates that pattern. Or think of the ambitious worker. They climb higher and higher, collecting promotions, recognitions, status symbols. But no matter how high they rise, inside they still feel unseen, unrecognized, starved for validation. And so even at the top, with applause surrounding them, they remain wounded. Because they were seeking from the outside what was broken on the inside. Jung warned against this. He saw that without inner confrontation, the unconscious simply adapts the same script to new circumstances. It's like moving to a new city and expecting your reflection in the mirror to change. The scenery is different, but the image staring back at you is the same. Now, here's another trap. Blame. It feels good, doesn't it? To say, my pain is because of them. My life is broken because of what they did. And maybe some of that is true. People can be cruel. People can betray you, exploit you, abandon you. But here's the problem. Blame locks you in place. Because when the source of your suffering is always someone else, you hand over your power. You say, I can't heal until they change. And that day never comes. Blame feels righteous, but it makes you powerless. Responsibility, on the other hand, feels heavier at first. But it's the only path that gives you power back. This doesn't mean excusing abuse or denying injustice. It means asking, what part of me accepted this dynamic? What part of me stayed silent? What part of me keeps replaying this? Only then can you begin to rewrite the script. Another illusion, self-help shortcuts. We live in an age of quick fixes. Affirmations will heal you. Positive thinking will change your life. Just raise your vibration and the pain disappears. But Jung's psychology is not about bypassing pain. It's about entering it, walking into the wound, not covering it with sugar. Because the shadow doesn't go away just because you say nice words in the mirror. It doesn't vanish because you meditate for 10 minutes a day. It only transforms when you bring it into awareness, face it without denial, and integrate it into your life. Jung said the shadow must be confronted, otherwise it acts out unconsciously. And that confrontation is uncomfortable, sometimes terrifying, which is why so many prefer the shortcut. But shortcuts circle you right back to the start. And then there's perhaps the most dangerous trap of all, armoring yourself so much that nothing and no one can touch you. You've seen people like this. Maybe you've been this person. The heart locked tight, walls built high. Never again will anyone hurt me. And it works partially. You avoid pain, but you also avoid intimacy, connection, joy. The armor that protects you becomes the cage that suffocates you. Jung believed life demands risk, that to individuate, to become whole, you must allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to feel. Otherwise, you never encounter the parts of yourself that only arise in relationship with others. So if avoidance, blame, shortcuts, and armor are all traps, what does real transformation look like? Here is where Jung offers us a path, not a simple one, but a real one. It begins with awareness, naming the wound, tracing the pattern, seeing the repetition not as coincidence, but as communication. Then comes confrontation. This is where most people turn away, because confrontation means looking into the mirror and seeing the part of yourself you least want to admit. The manipulative streak, the fear of abandonment that makes you cling, the self-rejection that poisons your relationships. Confrontation means saying, it's not just them, it's me too. And once you've confronted it, you move to integration. Integration is not about perfection. It's not about erasing the shadow. It's about making it conscious so that it no longer rules you from the dark. For example, if you see how your fear of rejection makes you sabotage relationships, you can acknowledge that fear when it rises instead of pretending it's not there. You can say, I feel afraid, and that's okay, but I won't let fear decide for me. That's integration, owning the shadow without being owned by it. And finally, responsibility. This is where transformation becomes real, because responsibility is not just insight, it's action. It's saying, I can't control the world. I can't stop others from hurting me, but I can change the way I show up. I can change the patterns I unconsciously repeat. I can change me. Jung saw this as the essence of individuation, not becoming perfect, not becoming untouchable, but becoming whole. And here's the paradox. When you integrate your wounds, you stop being controlled by them. And when you stop being controlled by them, you stop stepping into the same traps. That doesn't mean you'll never be hurt again. Life will always bring pain. But you won't be trapped in the same cycles. You won't keep bleeding from the same cut. And that changes everything. So let's make this real. Ask yourself, what is the hurt that keeps repeating? Write it down. Describe the pattern. Where does it show up? In love? In work? In friendship? Then trace it back. Where did you first feel this wound? Was it in childhood? Was it in a formative relationship? What moment burned this script into your psyche? And once you see that, don't rush to fix it. Sit with it. Feel it. Because the wound has been with you for a long time. It deserves to be witnessed, not bypassed. After that comes the slow work of rewriting. New behaviors, new choices, new responses. If you fear rejection, practice staying present when it arises instead of running. If you fear betrayal, practice setting boundaries instead of blindly trusting or completely shutting down. This is what Jung meant by transforming fate into choice, by making the unconscious conscious. It's not glamorous, it's not quick, but it's real. And slowly, you stop being the victim of repetition. You stop asking, why does this always happen to me? Because you begin to see. It was never random. It was always a mirror. And now that mirror reflects something new. We've explored the traps, the illusions, and the first real steps Jung points toward for transformation. But there is still one more layer we need to explore. Because even after you see the pattern, even after you begin to take responsibility, doubt creeps in. Resistance grows. The old wounds whisper louder than ever. And that's what we'll face next. The final reflections, the doubts and pitfalls, and how to keep walking this path when the shadow tries to pull you back. Because if the first stage explained why the hurt repeats, and the second showed how to begin breaking it, then the last will show how to sustain the transformation when everything in you wants to return to the familiar cycle. And that is the hardest test of all. You've seen how the cycle of hurt begins. You've seen how the shadow hides inside repetition. And you've seen how illusions keep you trapped, changing jobs, changing partners, wearing armor, blaming others, chasing shortcuts. But here is the most difficult part of all. Even when you see the pattern, even when you take the first steps of responsibility, you will face resistance. Because the shadow doesn't vanish simply because you've noticed it. It fights back. It resists exposure. It pulls you toward the old and the familiar. And this is the moment where most people give up. They say, this is too hard. Or, maybe I'm not ready. Or, maybe this is just who I am. But Jung would say this resistance is not failure. It's proof you are close to transformation. Imagine you are digging through the ground. At first the soil is loose, easy to move. But as you dig deeper, you hit rock, hard, unyielding, immovable. That rock is the shadow. It resists because it knows that once it is exposed, you will never be ruled by it again. So when resistance shows up, when the doubts get loud, when the old habits tempt you, that is the sign you are striking the core. Let's talk about those doubts. One doubt says, what if I can't change? What if this pain is permanent? But Jung's psychology is built on the opposite truth, that the psyche is alive, constantly moving, capable of renewal. He called it the process of individuation, the gradual becoming of who you truly are. So change is not only possible, it is the natural direction of the psyche. What feels permanent is just what you have not yet faced. Another doubt whispers, if I face this wound, it will destroy me. And yes, at first it may feel that way, because pain long avoided often returns with intensity. The grief you buried, the anger you swallowed, the fear you denied it, all rises at once. But Jung believed the psyche never gives you more than you can bear, that what emerges is exactly what you are ready to confront. The wound overwhelms only if you try to do it alone, without support, without guidance, without patience. The key is not to fight the pain, not to drown in it either, but to hold it, to sit with it, to let it speak. Because wounds speak in symbols. They appear in dreams. They rise in sudden emotion. They show themselves in patterns of life. If you learn to listen, you discover the wound was never trying to destroy you. It was trying to be heard. Another doubt. What if people leave me when I change? And the truth is, some will. Because when you stop repeating old roles, you disrupt the dynamics that kept certain relationships alive. If your identity was built on pleasing, you will lose the people who only loved you for your compliance. If your life was built on silence, you will lose the people who benefited from your quiet suffering. But what you gain are the relationships that can hold the real you. Not the mask, not the wound, but the person emerging from integration. And there is one final doubt, the most dangerous one. It says, What if all of this is meaningless? What if pain is just pain and there is nothing to learn? This is despair, and it is seductive, because if you believe pain has no meaning, you don't have to face it. You can numb yourself, distract yourself, drift through life half asleep. But Jung believed the opposite. He believed suffering is the crucible of transformation, that within pain lies the raw material of growth. Not because pain is good, not because you should seek it, but because avoiding it makes you fragment, while confronting it makes you whole. He once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." So despair, too, is part of the path. But it is not the end of the path. It is the threshold. Now, let's return to the question we began with. Why do you keep getting hurt? Because life is trying to show you what you have hidden from yourself. Because your unconscious insists on being made conscious. Because the wound you refuse to face becomes the script you keep repeating. And the way out is not escape. It is not avoidance. It is not building walls so high that nothing reaches you. The way out is through recognition, through confrontation, through integration, through responsibility. This path is not easy. It will test you. It will strip away illusions. It will ask you to let go of the comfort of blame, of shortcuts, of armor. But if you walk it, you will find something on the other side. Not a life without hurt, but a life where hurt no longer defines you. You will still feel pain, because to be alive is to feel. But you will not keep bleeding from the same wound. You will not keep mistaking repetition for fate. Instead, pain becomes a messenger, a teacher, a doorway, and that changes everything. So as you listen now, as you reflect on your own patterns, ask yourself, what is life trying to show me through the hurt that keeps repeating? What part of me is waiting to be seen, acknowledged, integrated? Because the moment you answer that honestly, you begin the work of individuation. You begin the process of becoming whole. And then the cycle breaks. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. If this message resonates with you, consider reflecting more deeply on the patterns you carry. Notice them, write them down, face them, and if you found value here, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Because we all carry wounds. We all repeat patterns. But together, by making the unconscious conscious, we can stop calling it fate. Thank you for listening. And remember, life is not against you. It is mirroring you. And when you change the reflection within, you change the world without.